All right, well, good morning, everybody. Good to see you guys here at Hope City Church today. It is a great summer Sunday. I hope you're enjoying beach days and pool days and some of the summer rainstorms and enjoying all those things. But today we're wrapping up one of our summer series that we've entitled Endangered Species. We are, taking a look at what is going on in in the lives around us, in our own lives. And, endangered species, this is just a 2-week series, kind of like mini lobster season, just 2 days. Anybody going down to the Keys for mini lobster season this year? Okay, good, because I was going to be really jealous, and it's not good for me to be jealous in church because I want to go. But hey, in this series, we have been noticing the connection between endangered species and endangered virtues in our own lives, particularly those virtues, those things that those of us who follow Christ and his ways have been called to. Last week we talked about some animals that are pretty endangered on the endangered species list. Those are far away from home. But this week, I wanted to share with you some things that are actually kind of in our backyard that are on the endangered species list. And we've got some heroes in our own community. And I'm talking about Mote Marine Laboratories. In fact, Mote Marine has identified the fact that Florida's coral reef system is by and large on the decline. And in fact, they've been waging war on this for quite a long time. They have been noticing that since 1980, almost 97% of our coral cover has died, that's crazy fast. And scientists are saying that it's at a tipping point, and they've determined that it's been decimated by disease, heavy human use, there's algae problems, and rising temperatures can bleach out the coral heads, and all of these things are a problem. But there's some warriors that are doing something about it here at Mote Marine. Look at this picture here. They have actually been birthing little baby corals in tanks just like this one over here, and they have been beginning to say, here's how we're going to rebirth this problem. One by one, they're going to take these corals and graft them into the existing reefs, knowing that this battle is long-term. They're committed to change. In fact, here's one of the scientists that's creating an outcropping of coral reefs there, that they're manufacturing what God had already put in nature because they're coming alongside of and flexing a little bit over here. This next picture is a woman that's holding up those little tiny corals that have been grown in tanks, and it's getting ready to be planted on the reef right there. And they spend time, effort, and energy because they've set a mission in front of them to introduce 500,000 new coral babies up and down the Keys over the next 2 decades. And if they accomplish this, what can happen is the entire ecosphere can change. They've said there's a problem, we've recognized it, we've been honest about it, and now we're gonna do something with it. We're gonna do something about it. And one of the targeted virtues on our list today is an endangered virtue for sure. It's one that if we don't do something about it, the entire ecosphere will completely change. Our lives will change. And that topic that I'm talking about, that virtue I'm talking about, is the word integrity. Integrity is the kind of trait that should show up in every follower of Christ. Every Christian should be marked by integrity. It should run rampant in the Christian church. But more and more, we find ourselves bending the rules for our integrity. In a culture that's willing to sacrifice integrity for the next promotion, the next gain, the next financial bump, we need to stand firm in integrity. Here's what integrity is. Integrity is doing what you said you would do, when you said you would do it, and how you said you would do it. It's doing the right thing, even when nobody is watching. I've been tempted with my integrity. There's been times when I'm like, do I have to do it the right way all the time? In fact, let me tell you about where this shows up most, where I'm most likely to cheat. It's in my workout, okay? Like, I'm telling you. I have a friend. He's a veteran. Kevin, can you join me here on stage for a second? I'm going to pull Kevin out. A veteran. There ain't nobody that can do a push-up like a veteran, okay? And so here, Kevin, I want you to, if you could assume the position, all right? Assume the position, and let's get a good old army push-up right there. There we go. Okay, that's one. All right, come on. We got 100 more. 2. All right, bam, bam. Look at this guy. Go, Kevin. All right, no, you're good. Thank Kevin for that, because I want to show you something. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for showing all of us up here in this space. So one of the days, my plan requires that I do 100 push-ups before I can move on to the next thing. And so after about 15, here's what I do. I get to this place and I'm like, 1, 2, 3, right? Like, who's watching, right? Like, nobody's gonna know. And in that moment, I'm saying to myself, that's not a real push-up. That is not a real push-up. Like, there is nothing about that is any good. And then you wonder, like, well, what happens when you get to about 47, and you're like, 47, 49, 50, 53, and like, how do we end up at 100 already? Like, it's crazy how this works. And this is a question of integrity, right? Like, this is a question of integrity. Does it really count? And what is it that you're holding to? See, there is a standard. Kevin set the standard. The standard was shown for him. And that is the standard by which a push-up counts, right? Jesus has set the standard for you and for me of what it looks like to live a life of integrity. And the funny thing is, in that little that exercise, who's like losing out in that if I don't do it right? It's not you, it's me. I'm the one that's losing out. See, we see little things like this all the time. Integrity issues all over the place. And, this is maybe a little bit of I might push your buttons here a little bit, but that's okay. Here's a few opportunities that you have to lose your integrity. Anybody been to Chipotle and gotten a water cup, right? You get a water cup from Chipotle and you go over to the machine and you press that button right there and oops, a little bit of lemonade got in there. Like, that's a sneaky little guy. How did that lemonade show up in my water cup? In fact, Chipotle is so aware of what you all are doing with their water cups that they created a soy-based candle called Water Cup that smells like lemonade. I'm not kidding. Is that incredible? Their PR firm is like, oh, we could make all the money we've lost on lemonade back by selling candles that smell like lemonade and call them Water Cup. It's great. Or like the time card. Many of you don't punch a time clock just like this one. In fact, some of you have never even seen a time clock like this. But we are expected and responsible to do the work that we've been tasked with, the jobs that you have, you've been employed. And you, when we see like, okay, we could take a little bit longer lunch, or I could, kind of jet out a little bit early, or I could go over here and not really be available to customers the way that I should be. This becomes a space that integrity can kind of slip. Or your screen time, like what you're scrolling through. You find yourself, and I honestly, like, we live in a world where you don't have to go looking for problems. Problems come looking for you, and they pop up on your phone without you even like wanting it to be there. But the question is, with your integrity, how long does it take for you to scroll past something you shouldn't be looking at? Or is it one of those kind of slow, I shouldn't be looking at this, scrolls, and then 45 seconds later, you're like, yeah, I didn't want to see that. That just popped up on my phone. Right? Like, I don't have anything to do with that. See, the funny thing about all of these examples is that what we find is knowing what is right is easier than doing what is right. Like, we're aware of what the right thing to do is, but it is incredibly hard to do what we know. See, following Jesus should not only make us know things. That can just puff you up. That can create religion. All you do is know something. Following Jesus, it leads us to live something, to live out the things that we know. And Jesus had such an incredibly high value on integrity. He's the model of integrity. And here's how you know that integrity is 1,000% on the endangered species list. Here's how you know. The surprising thing about integrity is how surprised we are when somebody has it. That's a problem. That is a problem. When you're like, let me tell you how good this contractor is. And then the next thing you say is, they showed up on time. Like, honestly, like, you're literally like, really? Like, that's the baseline, is that they just show up? You're not even telling me about the job that they did. They just showed up when they said they would, and they did the job that they said they would do. And that blows people away. I guarantee you that contractor will have work for years, because it's just so hard to find somebody that's going to do what they said they're going to do, right? Like, it's surprising when somebody returns your sunglasses to the lost and found at Publix. In fact, you might not even go and look for them anymore, because you're like, there is no chance that they're there. Those Ray-Bans, they're gone, right? Like, it's not going to happen. So integrity surprises us, and that should surprise us how surprised we are. See, these conversations, they just seem to be happening, and they seem to be centering around integrity. Now, integrity doesn't mean perfection, okay? So, like, it's not saying that you're going to live a perfect life, that you're not going to make a mistake. It means that you're going to live an integrated life. See, your life is whole. It's not fragmented. It means that you're consistent in your public life and your private life. You know, here's a pie chart that could potentially represent you. And this, you might have a couple other things on here, but for the most part, this is who we are as people. We have our family, we've got friends, we've got our spiritual life, we've got our private life, and we have our career. Now, I'm not saying that everybody's in the same place and that they're equal, but what I am kind of sharing with you is that each one of these places should not be operating from an individual value set. You should be operating in your group of friends the same way that you're operating in your career. To the same standard you hold yourself here, you should be holding yourself there. You shouldn't be telling your family one way to live, and then privately you live an entirely different way. That is a disintegrated life, and a disintegrated life disintegrates. And this is a problem. This is a problem, and this is where integrity comes alongside of us and helps bolster us. So if you're wondering, why should we talk about integrity? Proverbs 10:9 is everything that we need. It says, the man of integrity walks, securely, but he who takes crooked paths will be found out. Doing the wrong thing is stressful. Doing the wrong thing, it causes you to be looking over your shoulder all the time, like, who's gonna find out? I have never once went to bed and felt like, I had a hard time sleeping because I did the right thing that day. Like, I have never been like, boy, I hope that no one finds out that I did the right thing today. That is just not true. In fact, it's the complete opposite. Usually I'm like, nobody's ever gonna know that I did the right thing. Like, can I tell people about how I did the right thing? No, you lose sleep over the wrong thing, covering it up. When your private life is consistent with your public life, you walk securely. You're not afraid, you're not worried. Brene Brown said, integrity is choosing courage over comfort, choosing what is right over what is fun, fast, or easy, and it's choosing to practice our values rather than simply professing them. It's good, right? We love when this shows up in other people, but does it show up in you? Are you the kind of person that has integrity in your heart? See, Jesus talked to a specific group of people that didn't practice what they preach. And in fact, he used some very strong language with these people. And it's in Matthew chapter 23, verse 25 through 26. In the message notes, you can follow along there, or you can read it on the screen right next to me. It says, "Woe to you," or "Watch out, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites." He says, "You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they're full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside will also be clean." So do you know that Jesus was harder on hypocrites than he was on prostitutes and adulterers? See, a hypocrite is one that's exceptionally good at playing a game or wearing a mask or portraying something, putting on a performance. Here's how we're going to define a hypocrite. A hypocrite is a person who puts on a false display of virtue. Look at how good I am, right? Like, you button your collar up a little bit more and you stand a little taller and you just hold yourself in such a way to present to everybody else how great you are. Remember in ninth grade when like you would say, oh, you're such a poser. And that was like the worst insult that you could possibly come up with. Even in ninth grade, we knew that if you tried to pose as something, that wasn't cool. Like, oh, you're a poser. You don't skate. Like, you're not a surfer. You're not athletic. Like, you just pose as that. Like, everybody had the Charlotte Hornets puffy jacket. You remember that, like, pullover? No? Yeah, well, it's true. But everybody had one. Everybody. And I'm like, do you even like the Charlotte Hornets? No, nobody liked it. But they just everybody had to have that jacket. See, this is what Jesus was saying. He said, woe to you, you hypocrites. Like you're going in a direction and you're causing people to live one way, but you would never do that. You would never live like that. He's saying, you're just cleaning the outside up. You want to spit shine the outside, but the inside's disgusting. Another thing I got to admit to you is that as a parent, I am willing to do just about anything on a road trip with my kids. Like, do you want all the snacks? No problem. Like, do you want to just play unlimited amounts of games on your phone? Fine, have at it. Well, one time when our kids were really little, we were on a road trip to our family vacation, which was quite a distance. And we were going through a very kind of backwoods section of North Carolina at the time, and there was no bathrooms in sight. And one of my kids is like, I gotta go to the bathroom, and Tiffany looks at me, and then she looks down in the cup holders, and there's, my, Yeti cup right there, and she goes, here, use this. And I was like just pulling the car. I'm like, what are you doing? I was like, you can't use that. Like, that cup will be dead to me. Like, that thing needs to go to the recycling plant because I will never, ever, ever, ever use that cup again. I promise you, okay? Like, I'm not going to do it. I don't care if you run it through, like, some sort of high temperature washing machine. I don't care if you sandblast it. I am still not putting that cup to my lips. And this is what Jesus is getting after. He's like, okay, cool. It's all clean on the outside, but inside, it's disgusting. You're happy to just drink out of that? Ain't nobody doing that. And yet this is exactly the way that they were living. See, integrity works like that. Integrity starts on the inside and works its way outside. Integrity matches your behavior and your beliefs. So the things that you believe internally start to show up in your behavior externally. So I'm telling you this, it's deciding ahead of time what you will do when it comes time to make decisions. Okay? Listen to that. Remember the pie chart. Something is making music over here. Okay, so integrity is deciding ahead of time before you have to decide. And it applies to every area of your life. Like, it applies to your marriage. Your marriage is saying, I made a commitment to this person, and I'm going to decide ahead of time that when I'm out in public, I'm not going to let my eyes wander around or look around. I'm not going to just wonder, what if I married that person? Or what would it be like to be married to that person? You've decided to commit yourself, and therefore your behavior matches your beliefs. It changes. Or if it's your physical body, you have made a decision to be healthy, or you've made a decision to stay within a certain set of guidelines. And so you want the third donut, but you made the decision that I'm not going to, that 2 is probably enough, even if you're craving something else. You made the decision that you want to have a relationship with Jesus, not just a religion. And therefore, what it means is you're going to be praying. You're going to get in a connect group. You're going to read your Bible because what you believe impacts the way that you behave. King David was a man that had incredible integrity. He wasn't perfect, and he had moments that, he certainly were downfalls. But during the early part of King David's life, his integrity was an all-time high. His integrity changed his behavior. You remember that King David was going to be king. Even before he was king, he was anointed as the next king of Israel while King Saul was sitting on the throne. That's kind of a problem. Like, in the way that kingdoms work, if there's a sitting king and then one that's like kind of up and coming, that becomes an issue. And King Saul began to hate David the shepherd boy. He began to hate David the warrior. He began to hate David the leader. And so he was getting ready to kill David because he was a threat to him. And so you remember the story. David he ran away from the kingdom. He ran away from King Saul, and Saul gave chase, and he went after King David. And so David finds himself in the desert of En-Gedi. En-Gedi is right outside of the Dead Sea. And so he's up in these kind of in the rocks, and there's a cave there. He and his men tuck up into that cave because King Saul was in hot pursuit. And so King Saul also ends up in the valley of En-Gedi. And at this point in time, King Saul's like one of my kids, and he's like, I got to go to the bathroom, right? And so he goes up into the very same cave that King David's at. Now, we're going to keep it PG, but here's what happens. It says Saul went in to relieve himself. David and his men were far back in the cave, and the men said, this is your day. This is the day that the Lord spoke of when he said, I'll give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish. In other words, go take him out, man. Let's go get him. Then David crept up unnoticed and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. So many questions right here, but we're just going to stick with the story. Afterward, David was conscience-stricken for having cut off a corner of his robe. David's men are like, kill him, go take him out. And David's like, cut a corner off because I've got the power. But his integrity gets a hold of him. Look at this. It says that then David went out of the cave, called out to Saul, my lord the king. And when Saul looked behind him, realizing where he had come from, David bowed down, he prostrated himself with his face in the ground, and he said to Saul, why do you listen to when men say David's bent on harming you? This day you've seen what your own eyes, how the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I'll not lift my hand against my master because he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father, look at this piece of your robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe, but did not kill you. Now understand and recognize that I'm guilty of wrongdoing. I'm not guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I've not wronged you, but you're hunting me to take down my life. May the Lord judge you between you and me, and may the Lord avenge the wrongs you've done to me. Not my hand will not touch you. David is saying, I will do no such thing because you are the Lord's anointed. In fact, I can't even believe that I cut off the corner of your robe. Like I dishonored you. And I shouldn't have done that. When he was faced with the decision, David's integrity, it moved him to action. And understand that David was hiding in a cave with nowhere to go, and Saul had all of his men right in front of him. David knew that stepping out of that cave would put his own life at risk. Even if they didn't kill him, they could wait him out. They could starve him out. He couldn't do anything, right? Like he had this moment where his integrity drove him to do the right thing. He was exposed, outflanked, and yet he confessed. Because integrity chooses the long-term gain over the short-term thrills. The short-term thrill would have been to knife Saul in the back to take him out. But what would have happened? An uprising would have lasted for maybe a little bit, and then there would be continual uprisings, one after another. Is that what he wanted? No. He knew his integrity was worth more than that. He knew that the long-term gain that he would get was far more valuable than any kind of short-term thrill. Several years ago, I had a boss that I didn't support to the best that I could have. And in fact, he made some decisions that I didn't really like, and I became like a toddler with paint on my hands, kind of like leaving marks everywhere and making messes everywhere. And the thing is, I told everybody about it other than my boss. And, it came to a place where I recognized what I had done. Somebody kind of was like, have you talked to him about that? And I realized that my integrity was actually at risk, that who I said I was and the type of leader and pastor that I wanted to be wasn't matching up with the way that I was actually living. And when I made that decision, or when I recognized that, I knew that what I had to do was go back and actually set a meeting with my boss, sit down and confess and apologize that I hadn't supported him the way that I should have, and I owned it. And the crazy thing is that our relationship grew stronger And even to this day, I consider him one of my friends. Like we worked through that, my integrity. I might have had some short-term thrills when I was, talking about his decision, but the long-term gains were at risk. The relationship I have with him now was completely at risk if I hadn't paid attention to that. In fact, our relationship is stronger now than it ever has been. Your integrity is worth way too much to just throw away over a short-term thrill or some hot moment. You'll have to keep chasing those types of moments. If exaggerating a story in a second just gets you a little bit of a thrill in around the people that you're with, you have to keep exaggerating a story. If you lie on your resume to get a job, now you're always looking over your shoulder like, when are they going to figure out that I really don't know what I'm doing? See, it's crazy how our hearts and our desires can lead us to actions that can actually destroy our integrity. Integrity is on the endangered species list because we live in a society that says, just follow your heart. Do whatever your heart says. And yet the Bible says that the human heart is the most deceitful of all things. And this is God speaking to Jeremiah. This isn't Jeremiah coming up with his own stuff. Like God said to Jeremiah, it's the most deceitful and it's desperately wicked. Who really knows how bad it is? But I, the Lord, I search all hearts and examine secret motives. The heart will lie to you. It will lie to me. Your heart is not always properly motivated. And it's no wonder that we've got an entire culture running around trying to follow their hearts, that integrity is nowhere to be found. Psalm 139, 23 through 24 says, search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting. This is how we regain integrity. This is how we continue to see integrity strengthened in us. Do you see the wisdom in this? God, test me. See, just play it out. God, I want to be faithful to you. Have you noticed that the heroes of the Bible are all different? They all come from different places. And yet there's something that is remarkably similar about them. And it's that when they were alone, God knew they could be trusted. They were people of integrity. Moses was scared. Jonah doubted. David had unswerving faith. Gideon was from an unimportant family. And yet when they were alone, God could trust them. Integrity is never beyond accountability. In fact, I want to encourage you, strengthen your integrity by asking for help. By just asking. Did you see in Psalm 139 it said, God, search me. He's asking God for something. Ask God to search you and what's going on inside of you. But then to turn those questions inward and ask yourself. In fact, I want to give you 3 questions. You can write these down. 3 questions to ask yourself about your own integrity. Ask yourself, where am I most defensive? Where am I most secretive? And where am I most critical? Because the places that I'm most defensive might be the places that I'm most vulnerable. And the places that you're most secretive might be the places that you have the most shame. And the places where you are most critical of others may be the places that you are the weakest. Don't skip these questions because these questions, it's like wimping out on your workout. You're only cheating yourself. You got to ask God, ask yourself for help, and then ask others to help you as well. Accountability is critical in maintaining your integrity. I love my wife, and I love my kids. And there is nothing more precious and valuable to me than those things. But I also keep myself accountable to my wife and to my kids. Getting really practical, I have boundaries set up in my life that I will not cross. Tiffany knows the password to my phone. I share my location with her. She's complete access to my calendar. I'm committed to strengthening my integrity. But I've given permission to some friends around me too, some close, trusted friends, and I said, you have permission to ask me the hard questions. Like, how's your marriage? Are you treating your wife well? Are you giving your kids time? What's going on? Like, they can call me out of love and concern for me. You got to find somebody to be accountable to. You don't have to be vulnerable with everybody, but you do with somebody. Your integrity needs it. Because listen to me, integrity is easier to maintain than it is to recover. If you do something in a matter of moments, you can lose your integrity, and it takes you months, years, maybe even a lifetime to get it back. And I promise you that it's worth it. It's worth everything. Your reputation is who other people think you are, but your integrity is who you actually are. So spend some time, ask for help, ask these questions. See, we're going to do this because Jesus set the model for us to live a life that is fully integrated, to love God, to love others, and to do it in a way that honors Him. When you strengthen your integrity, I promise that you will strengthen every aspect of your life. Watch as trust goes up. Watch as God's favor on your life goes up. Watch as blessings show up. Watch as your relationships blossom and become something you may not have thought was even possible. Watch as your kids look to you as an example and they say, I want to follow in your footsteps. Integrity leads in that direction. We've said this before, but having integrity may cause you to stand out of the crowd when it's easier to blend in and just let your integrity go to the side. Trust God in those moments and leave all the results to Him. And let's shock people with our integrity.